Don't touch my car! The shout cracked across the concrete canyon of the industrial district. Heads
Don't
turned,
touch my car!
phones lifted, and the crowd circling the idling machine pressed in closer. Smoke curled in blue-gray ribbons from the vents of a low, angular hypercar, a quantum apex. The kind of engineering miracle most people only saw in glossy magazines or on billionaire Instagram feeds. The man doing the shouting, Daniel Mercer, wasn't just anyone. Founder of Nexus Technologies, a man Forbes had labeled the Oracle of Thermodynamics. Daniel was worth billions. He had made his fortune transforming cooling systems for quantum processors, turning obscure patents into fortunes. And now he stood on the curb, immaculate in his tailored navy suit, waving off a disheveled figure who had dared to approach his $4.2 million status symbol. "Step back," Daniel snapped, jaw tightening. His manicured finger hovered over the emergency call icon on his phone. The figure he dismissed looked nothing like an engineer. Caleb Turner's jacket was frayed at the cuffs, his jeans streaked with city dust, his beard weeks past any razor's touch. A canvas grocery bag slung over his shoulder held everything he owned. Yet when he stepped forward, palms open, his voice was calm, steady, unmistakably professional. "Sir," Caleb said, nodding toward the hiss and sputter beneath the carbon fiber shell, "your thrust cooling system has a microfracture in the secondary loop. I can fix it." The crowd shifted. Some smirked, already recording on TikTok. A homeless man lecturing a billionaire about proprietary engine systems? Comedy gold. Daniel's laugh was sharp, dismissive. Do you even know what kind of technology this is? This car isn't a Ford with a leaking radiator. It's the Quantum Apex, Caleb finished. 17 produced worldwide, proprietary 3-tier cooling. I know. His eyes narrowed on the smoke. You've got 35 minutes before catastrophic bearing failure. For a beat, Daniel froze. That was exactly the time estimate flashing on his car's internal diagnostics. He masked his unease with more contempt. That's classified information. How the hell would you know that? Because, Caleb said evenly, I helped to design the prototype system it's based on. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone snorted. Another whispered, "Yeah, right." But Caleb didn't flinch. He'd been laughed at before, on streets, in shelters, in job interviews that ended before they began. Daniel's thumb pressed harder on his phone. Security would handle this. Security always handled this. But then he caught it. 3 syllables that hit like a bell in his memory. Memo XT447. Caleb had just referenced an internal Aerodyne Industries document number. A memo about cooling stress fractures Daniel himself had skimmed 5 years ago, long before the car's production run. The number was never public. He shouldn't know it. The billionaire's heart ticked faster. "Who are you?" Daniel asked finally, suspicion threading through his tone. "My name is Caleb Turner," came the quiet reply. 5 years ago, I was a lead thermal engineer at Aerodyne. MIT, triple degree, 7 patents. I wrote that memo you're remembering. Daniel's mouth went dry. The name was familiar, though, for all the wrong reasons. Caleb Turner had vanished from the industry after a scandal. Prototype failure, millions lost, whispered accusations of negligence, a convenient scapegoat. Daniel remembered reading the headlines, then forgetting the man existed. Until now, the smoke from the apex thickened, rising in restless plumes. The crowd pressed closer. Investors, journalists, and rivals could appear at any moment. Daniel's billion-dollar image was on the line as much as his machine. "You're trespassing," said a deep voice. 2 uniformed guards appeared from a sleek SUV campus security from the tech complex nearby. They eyed Caleb like a threat. "Step away from the vehicle." Caleb held his ground. He had nothing left to lose. If you tow it, the fracture spreads. If you idle it, the bearing seize. The service center doesn't have the alloy replacement. That engine will be ruined inside half an hour. The taller guard advanced. "Sir, final warning." "Wait." Daniel raised a hand, frowning hard. His instincts screamed not to trust this ragged man. But the data points lined up. The memo number, the time estimate, the cost prediction that only an insider would know. "Tell me," Daniel said slowly, "what exactly is happening inside that engine?" Caleb exhaled, then spoke with the quiet precision of a surgeon explaining an X-ray. "The secondary loop carries nano-coolant across the thrust bearings. The fracture's letting coolant bleed into the tertiary chamber, vaporizing on the shielding. That's the smoke. In 11 minutes, temperatures reach critical. Bearings warp. Total engine replacement. 3 months lead time. $870,000 minimum." The street fell silent. Even the guards hesitated. The level of detail, the cost figure, the metallurgy was impossible to fake. Daniel's mind raced. His phone calls to the manufacturer had already ended in dead ends, 2 hours before help arrived. His investor meeting was in less than 3. His car, his reputation, his control slipping through his fingers. And the only lifeline was a man society had discarded. Caleb saw his hesitation and pressed, voice low but firm. "Give me 20 minutes and basic tools. I can stabilize it. You'll drive to your meeting on time, or dismiss me, and watch $3 million burn in smoke while Twitter has its fun." A hush settled, thick as the smoke rising from the apex. Camera lenses caught every flicker of Daniel Mercer's face, arrogance wrestling with desperation. The guards shifted uneasily. The crowd waited. Caleb stood calm, hands still open, his dignity intact despite the stares, the laughter, the threat of removal. Daniel's jaw tightened. His thumb hovered over the emergency call one last time. Then, slowly, he lowered the phone. "Show me," he said. And with that, the clock began to tick, not just for the car, but for both their lives. The hood of the Quantum Apex hissed open with a sound like a vault releasing its secrets. A dozen phones tilted higher to capture the spectacle. Even in smoke and failure, the hypercar's insides gleamed with aerospace precision. Coils of carbon tubing, nano-cooled chambers. The kind of design language meant to intimidate as much as inspire. Daniel Mercer's heart hammered. His security team hovered close, ready to yank the ragged intruder back at the slightest sign of sabotage. Yet the billionaire had given the words, the dangerous permission. "Show me." Caleb Turner didn't touch a thing. Instead, he leaned in, studying the plumes of vapor with the steady eye of someone who had seen this exact pattern before. "Secondary coolant bleeding into tertiary chamber," he murmured, half to himself, half to the machine. His voice carried the same tone an old soldier used when recognizing a battlefield. Daniel, impatient, barked, "Don't narrate. Prove you know what you're talking about." Caleb pointed to a seam just beneath the shielding, invisible to most eyes. "That's the fracture point. Clear residue here? That's nano-coolant crystallizing. It's exactly what I documented in Memo XT4047. Daniel froze. The crowd had no idea what XT4047 meant. But Daniel did. Internal Aerodyne Memo, unpublished, known only to engineers and executives. The taller guard stepped forward. "Mr. Mercer, this man could be bluffing. For all we know, he memorized details from a leak." "No leak," Caleb said firmly. His eyes didn't waver. "I wrote the memo. I warned your executives this weakness would surface. They ignored it. And now," he gestured at the streaming smoke, "you're living with the consequences." Laughter erupted from a corner of the crowd, sharp and mocking. "Yeah, right," a bystander jeered. "The homeless guy invented rocket science too." A ripple of chuckles followed. The guard smirked. Even Daniel almost wanted to dismiss him again, until the car's onboard diagnostics chimed loudly. "Warning, 30 minutes to critical system failure." The words glowed red across Daniel's console screen. His face paled. The timing matched Caleb's earlier prediction exactly. For a moment, Daniel stood on a knife's edge between trust and humiliation. logic, and prejudice. His company's fate hung on this decision. His investors were expecting him in less than 3 hours. If the apex failed publicly, his entire aura of invincibility would collapse. And this man, this forgotten man in torn clothes, might be the only one who could save him. Fine, Daniel muttered, but I want verification. He jabbed his phone and scrolled to a familiar name. Dr. Eleanor Chen, chief engineer at Spacetech Industries. Old friend, rival, and one of the few people Daniel trusted without reservation. The call connected. Anthony, Eleanor's clipped, professional voice came through. This is unexpected. Daniel shot Caleb a glance. There's someone here who claims to know you. Says his name is Caleb Turner. Silence. Then the sound of papers dropping on the other end. Caleb Turner? Caleb Turner is with you right now? The crowd stilled. Even the guards leaned closer. Yeah, Daniel said carefully. He's standing in front of me. Through the speaker, Eleanor's voice sharpened with urgency. Don't waste a second questioning him. If Caleb says he can fix your car, let him. He's the most brilliant thermal engineer I've ever worked with. His design saves spacecraft still in orbit today. And if you have any doubt, ask your investors what they'd pay to have his mind back in the game. Daniel's throat went dry. The name had been a scandal once, a stain. Yet here was Eleanor Chen herself, rewriting the story in real time. Caleb stood calm, but a faint tremor touched his hands. 3 years invisible, and now suddenly his name carried weight again. The security chief, Reynolds, cleared his throat. Mr. Mercer, this is highly irregular. Homeless or not, this man is unauthorized. The car contains technology worth millions. If something goes wrong, Caleb interrupted, his voice like steel. Your car dies in 28 minutes, and you'll have more than a PR crisis. You'll have an $800,000 repair and a canceled investor meeting. I'm your only option. Daniel's eyes bored into him. You fix this, Turner, and we'll talk. You fail. Caleb's gaze didn't falter. I won't fail. The crowd murmured again. Phones flashing. Daniel's reputation. Caleb's dignity. The machine's survival. Everything now danced on the edge of a countdown clock. And as Caleb rolled up his sleeves, ready to perform a miracle with nothing but scavenged tools and genius memory, neither man could know this wasn't just a repair. It was the start of a reckoning. The hood of the Quantum Apex stood open like the chest cavity of some futuristic beast, steam curling upward in faint blue-gray plumes. The industrial street had transformed into an arena. Strangers ringed the curb, phones held high, eager to record what could be a viral implosion or an impossible resurrection. Daniel Mercer, billionaire wunderkind, stood with arms crossed, face carved in a mask of authority. Yet inside, unease rattled him. He had spent his entire career trusting only those with credentials, polish, pedigrees. Now he had handed the fate of his rarest possession, and perhaps his reputation, to a man who looked like he had crawled out of the ashes of failure. Caleb Turner bent over the engine with quiet reverence. To him, the Apex was not just a luxury toy. It was a culmination of years of stolen work, a machine whose every flaw he had once predicted. Seeing it falter was not just irony, it was personal. Tools, Caleb said simply. Daniel gestured to his trunk. One of the guards retrieved a sleek carbon fiber case, embossed with the Apex insignia. Caleb took it carefully, opening the lid with the measured air of a surgeon about to perform an operation. The tools gleamed like instruments in an operating theater, chrome and graphite, polished to a cold perfection. Caleb's rough hands moved with startling precision, organizing the pieces by instinct. Ratchet, micro bond applicator, diagnostic probe. His motions betrayed years of training, years no one watching could imagine belonged to the man in ragged clothes. The shorter guard returned from the convenience store across the street, clutching a small bag. Here, the pencils you asked for, 8B grade, Stettler Mars Lumograph. Caleb's lips curved faintly. Perfect. The guard handed them over with a curious respect, remembering how the shelter staff had spoken of Caleb as a genius. The mocking tone of earlier was gone. Daniel raised an eyebrow. You're seriously telling me you're going to fix a hypercar with pencil lead? Not lead, Caleb corrected, sliding the graphite core from the wood casing with practiced care. Graphite nanoparticles. The density of 8B makes it compatible with the polymer base of your emergency sealant. Together, they'll form a molecular bond with the alloy of your secondary loop. Daniel scoffed, though unease colored his voice. You sound like a man improvising science fiction. Caleb looked up sharply. Improvisation is the difference between genius and bureaucracy. Aerodyne ignored my warnings because they didn't want improvisation. They wanted deadlines. And here we are. The crowd murmured, the tension thick as smog. Warning, 18 minutes to critical system failure. The Apex's diagnostic voice cut through the air. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then get on with it. Caleb unscrewed the access panel with deft, economical motions. A faint hiss escaped, followed by a sharp spray of vapor. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing on the hairline crack in the cooling conduit. There, he said, voice low but certain. Exactly where I told them it would appear. Daniel crouched beside him despite himself, peering in. At first he saw nothing. Then his gaze caught it, a silver thread, a fissure so fine it looked accidental. Yet the smoke patterns, the vapor, all confirmed Caleb's claim. How can something so small cause so much damage? Daniel muttered. Caleb glanced at him. Because systems under quantum-level pressure don't forgive weakness. Even a fracture thinner than a hairline becomes catastrophic. That's what you never understood in boardrooms. Nature doesn't care about profit margins. Daniel bristled, but said nothing. Caleb mixed the graphite powder with the sealant, his hands steady as stone. He used the flat edge of a tool to grind it finer, then combined it in a small steel cap until the mixture shimmered faintly. The smell was acrid, sharp. He leaned back, exhaled. This compound will hold for 3 weeks, he said. Enough to get you through your meeting and to proper service, but you must keep output below 70%. Push harder, and the bond will fail. Daniel gave a short, humorless laugh. You expect me to drive a $4 million hypercar at 70%? You expect it to move at all right now, Caleb countered, meeting his eyes. For the first time, Daniel looked away first. Warning, 14 minutes to critical system failure. The crowd pressed closer. Someone whispered, "This is like a movie." Another muttered, "If he pulls this off, it'll blow up online." Reynolds, the head of security, hovered near Daniel. "Sir, if something goes wrong..." "If something goes wrong," Daniel snapped, "we were already out of options." Reynolds shut his mouth. Caleb lowered the compound into the fracture site with surgical precision. His hands didn't shake. He applied pressure slowly, sealing the crack while murmuring calculations under his breath. Ratios, heat tolerances, tensile strengths, numbers only he seemed to understand. The crowd fell eerily quiet. Dozens of strangers, holding their phones like candles, watching one man gamble his dignity against a machine worth more than all their lives combined. Caleb's brow glistened with sweat. The mixture sizzled as it met the superheated alloy, then hardened almost instantly into a darkened seal. He held his breath, waiting. The hissing stopped. The smoke thinned. For the first time, the apex seemed to breathe easier. "Coolant vent," Caleb said curtly. Daniel handed him a valve tool without question. Caleb drained the contaminated fluid into a makeshift container fashioned from the toolkit's empty case. The liquid shimmered with iridescence, worth more than gold by weight. "That's $20,000 in fluid," Daniel murmured. "Then be grateful we salvaged 60%, Caleb replied flatly. "Warning, 10 minutes to critical system failure." The alert jarred the air again, though the smoke had nearly vanished. Almost there, Caleb muttered. He refilled the chamber with reserve coolant from the emergency kit, careful to regulate flow. His movements had the fluid grace of someone who not only knew the system, but had built it from memory long ago. The crowd leaned in, breath held. Daniel found himself whispering, despite his disbelief. "Can it work?" Caleb gave a faint smile. "You'll know in 2 minutes." The final panel slid back into place with a metallic click. Caleb wiped his hands on a rag, then stood, tall and unshaken. He turned to Daniel. "Start it." Daniel hesitated. His mind replayed every warning, every dismissal, every instinct to reject this man. Yet the countdown screamed in his ears. Warning, 2 minutes to critical system failure. His thumb pressed the ignition. The apex shuddered once, then roared alive with a sound so pure, so powerful, it silenced the street. No smoke. No warning lights. Just the deep, purring hum of an engine stabilized. The diagnostic screen flickered, then declared, "System stabilizing. Performance limited to 70%. Service required." The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause. A wave of voices shouting Caleb's name, repeating it to their cameras. Strangers clapped his back. Phones surged closer, capturing every second. Daniel stared at the readout, then at Caleb. His disbelief cracked into something rarer respect. "You did it," he said quietly. "That's impossible." Caleb shook his head. "No, it's engineering. The impossible is just the word people use when they don't want to try." For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them. Two men on opposite sides of fortune, now bound by one repaired machine. Daniel extended his hand, hesitant at first, then firm. "Thank you." Sincerely. Caleb looked at it, then clasped it. His grip was strong, steady, unflinching. The cameras captured the moment. Billionaire and homeless man, hand in hand, framed by the gleaming apex. The image would ripple across social feeds within minutes, rewriting both their stories in the court of public opinion. But for Caleb Turner, it wasn't about virality. It was about dignity, about proving, even for a moment, that brilliance couldn't be buried forever. And for Daniel Mercer, it was the first crack in his worldview, a fracture deeper than any in a cooling system. Because in that handshake, he saw the undeniable truth. The genius who had saved him had been left to rot on the streets, ignored by the very system Daniel had built his empire upon. The apex purred steadily, ready to roll. The crowd buzzed, alive with the thrill of witnessing the unthinkable. And as Daniel gestured Caleb toward the waiting SUV, muttering, "Come with me. There's more to discuss." The real engine began to ignite not of the car, but of a partnership that neither man could yet imagine. What started as smoke and arrogance was about to set Silicon Valley on fire. The quantum apex slid through the streets of downtown like nothing had happened. Its hum was steady, smooth, a predator at rest. But inside the back seat of the armored SUV trailing behind it, Caleb Turner sat uncomfortably in silence. For 3 years he had walked these same streets invisible, a shadow among the neon glow of luxury towers. Now the same city blurred past tinted glass as if it had decided, without warning, to let him back in. Beside him, Daniel Mercer tapped briskly on a tablet. The billionaire's suit was unwrinkled, his composure fully restored, but his eyes flicked toward Caleb with uncharacteristic curiosity. "You understand what just happened out there will be everywhere in an hour," Daniel said. "Half that crowd had cameras. Hashtag homeless genius saves billionaire. You'll trend before my investor meeting even starts." Caleb stared out the window. "Virality doesn't change truth." Daniel paused. "No, but it changes perception. And perception is what runs this city." They pulled to a stop outside Bespoke on Fifth Avenue, the kind of boutique that treated fabric like sacred scripture. The staff had been alerted already. Within minutes, Caleb was ushered into a private fitting room. He emerged 40 minutes later, transformed. The suit was charcoal gray, tailored to his frame with surgical precision. His beard had been trimmed into sharp lines, his hair styled back. For the first time in years, Caleb caught his reflection and almost didn't recognize himself. The hollow-cheeked drifter from the shelter was gone. In his place stood the man who had once lectured at MIT, who had presented papers to international conferences. Daniel's lips curved into something between approval and triumph. Now you look the part of the engineer you are. Caleb adjusted his cufflinks, expression unreadable. Appearances are deceptive. That's the point of this entire day, isn't it? Daniel chuckled, but unease lingered in his eyes. The glass lobby of Nexus Innovations gleamed under white light as they entered. Employees froze mid-step when they saw Daniel return with a stranger in tow. The Apex had already pulled into the underground garage. Its repair was still a secret here. Mr. Mercer, a woman in her 50s approached, elegance in every line of her navy dress. Sophia Reyes, CTO. Her sharp eyes flicked to Caleb. And this must be Caleb Turner, Daniel said smoothly. The man who just saved my Apex. Sophia's composure cracked, her breath catching. The Caleb Turner? Space tech. Quantum cooling. Your work was… She shook her head, disbelief shading into awe. Revolutionary. I can't believe you're here. Caleb inclined his head politely. It feels like a lifetime ago. Sophia's laugh carried genuine admiration. Your designs are still the backbone of our latest systems. What you accomplished in 3 years, most teams haven't matched in decades. Daniel cut in, which is why I've invited him to observe today's presentation. If he sees flaws, he'll point them out. Sophia's eyes gleamed. Then let's hope we built something worthy of his critique. The boardroom filled quickly. A dozen investors, their suits sharper than knives, settled into leather chairs. They whispered among themselves, eyeing the unfamiliar man at Daniel's side. Daniel stood at the head of the table. Before we begin, allow me to introduce a special guest. This is Caleb Turner, original architect of the quantum thrust cooling systems, now powering half our industry. He also just performed an emergency repair on my Apex that the manufacturer insisted was impossible. A ripple ran through the room. Some frowned in confusion. Others raised eyebrows in surprise. The name Caleb Turner was a ghost in Silicon Valley, a cautionary tale, a scandal. And now he was standing here, alive, composed, impossible to dismiss. Mr. Turner will observe today's presentation, Daniel continued. If our technology holds up under his scrutiny, I suspect our future is assured. All eyes turned to Caleb. He nodded once, calm as stone, then sat. The presentation began. Slides flashed. Voices droned about quantum computing's thermal bottlenecks, about market potential and projected efficiency. Investors nodded dutifully, but Caleb's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the provided notes. Equations, schematics. His mind leapt like wildfire through the data. Half an hour in, Daniel finally turned to him. Caleb, your thoughts? The room stilled. Caleb set down his pen. 3 critical flaws, he said quietly. Every investor leaned forward. First, your secondary coolant channels are too narrow. Under peak loads, you'll hit turbulence that destabilizes the nanoflow. Second, your pressure regulation valves are positioned opposite the thermal expansion axis, inefficient and dangerous. And third, he took the stylus, sketching swiftly on the digital pad. In seconds, he outlined a modified architecture. You can increase efficiency by 34% and cut manufacturing costs by 12%. If you rewrote here, silence. Then a low whistle. Sophia Reyes leaned forward, eyes blazing. He's right. I can't believe we didn't see it. His modification would put us years ahead. Investors murmured excitedly, exchanging looks. Notes scribbled. Phones buzzed as assistants rushed to run projections. One man in a silk tie spoke up. If this is true, we're underestimating returns by billions. Another, How long would it take to integrate? Sophia. Weeks, not months. He's given us the map. Daniel watched, astonished. The man he had nearly dismissed as a nuisance had just shifted the room's axis. Investors who had entered cautious were now glowing with fervor. Commitments doubled, tripled, spilling across the table in promises of funding. By the time the meeting adjourned, Nexus Innovations was secured for years to come. The last investor left. The glass door clicked shut. Silence filled the room, heavy and charged. Daniel turned to Caleb. That was extraordinary. You didn't just improve our design, you transformed it. Caleb met his gaze evenly. Your team built the foundation. I just corrected the blind spots. Sophia's voice softened with wonder. Blind spots that every other firm in the valley missed? You're a once-in-a-generation mind. Caleb, Daniel stepped closer. As promised, I'm prepared to offer you a consulting role. Name your price. Caleb studied him, expression thoughtful. You don't understand. It's not about price, it's about purpose. Daniel frowned. Then what do you want? Caleb reached into his jacket pocket and unfolded several creased sheets of paper. The pages were worn, edges frayed, but covered in precise sketches and formulas. These are patents I've developed over the last 3 years, he said. Ideas drafted on discarded newspapers, library scraps, whatever I could find. They're solutions to problems your industry hasn't even acknowledged yet. Daniel scanned the first page. His breath caught. The equations were elegant, radical, worth fortunes. He flipped to another, a cooling system for quantum neural networks. Another, a stabilizer for deep space propulsion. Each page more astonishing than the last. These are revolutionary, Daniel whispered. Caleb nodded. Imagine what I could have built with resources. Now multiply that by every brilliant mind society has ignored because of poverty, prejudice, or misfortune. Daniel looked up slowly. You're not asking me for a job. You're asking me for something bigger. Caleb's eyes held his. An innovation center, not just to develop technology, but to recover talent, to find the overlooked, the discarded, and give them a chance. People like me, people better than me. Daniel stared at him, the weight of the idea settling like a storm in his chest. This isn't just redemption, he murmured. It's revolution. Caleb's expression softened. Exactly. And there, in the gleaming boardroom where fortunes shifted daily, 2 men, 1 billionaire, one once forgotten, stood on the edge of something greater than both of them. Not just a repaired car, not just an investor win, the start of a movement. The boardroom lights dimmed automatically as the last investor's footsteps faded down the hall. Beyond the glass wall, the skyline of the city shimmered, evening's first neon flickers rising like signals of another sleepless night. Inside, silence lingered. Daniel Mercer leaned back in his chair, still clutching the creased sketches Caleb Turner had pulled from his pocket. He turned them slowly, as though afraid the fragile paper might disintegrate under his fingers. Equations, diagrams, designs that seemed to peer decades ahead. You realize, Daniel said at last, that what you've drawn here, this one alone, he tapped a sketch of a cooling lattice for quantum neural networks, would be worth more than my entire company in 3 years. Caleb sat across from him, posture upright, expression calm. He didn't gloat, didn't smile. Ideas are worth nothing without access, without infrastructure, without trust. Sophia Reyes, still in the room, let out a low whistle. I've seen prototypes in classified labs that don't come close to this. And you're telling me you drafted it on the back of newspapers? Caleb nodded. Ink smudges, coffee stains, margins filled with math. I used what I could find. Sophia looked from Daniel to Caleb. You can't let this man walk out of here. He's a living national asset. Daniel set the papers down, exhaling slowly. He studied Caleb the way he'd study a piece of code searching for errors. loopholes, weaknesses. But there were none, just a man who had been broken, then built himself back, carrying brilliance in hands the world had dismissed. "What do you want?" Daniel asked quietly. Caleb leaned forward, his voice steady. "Not a title, not a salary, a center, a place where people like me, people written off by the system, can recover, rebuild, contribute. An innovation recovery center, funded not by charity, but by the wealth of their own ideas." Daniel blinked. "You're suggesting a talent incubator for the overlooked?" "No," Caleb corrected. "For the discarded. I've met them. In shelters, in line at food banks. Veterans who once designed avionics. Coders who once worked for Fortune 500 companies. Doctors who can't get licensed again because of one mistake. Our society discards people too quickly. And genius doesn't survive on sidewalks?" Sophia whispered. "My God." Caleb unfolded another page, this one scrawled with a rough organizational chart. Engineers, scientists, thinkers, all wasting away because no one will give them a second look. What if instead of ignoring them, we created an environment where their ideas were not only heard, but built, where the barrier wasn't a resume or a credit score, but raw potential? Daniel rubbed his temple, mind racing. He was a man who calculated ROI instinctively, who could turn visions into valuations. But this was not about valuation. This was about rewriting the rules entirely. "You realize how radical this is," Daniel said. "Investors won't touch it. They'll call it philanthropy." Caleb's gaze sharpened. "Then let them. But the patents I've been drafting for 3 years, they're not philanthropy. They're capital. They'll fund the launch, cover the infrastructure, attract attention. And once people see results, once they see forgotten men and women producing breakthroughs, the industry will follow. Because nothing speaks louder than innovation." Daniel stared at him for a long moment. The billionaire in him felt the weight of risk. The human in him felt something else entirely: shame. Maybe that it had taken a smoking engine and a viral crowd to show him what was right in front of him. "What about you?" Daniel asked. "What do you want out of this? Redemption? Revenge?" Caleb's answer was immediate. "Neither. I want prevention. I don't care about clearing my name anymore. But I refuse to let another mind go to waste the way mine almost did." The words hung heavy, echoing louder than any investor's pitch. Hours later, the two men stood on the rooftop balcony of Nexus Innovations. The city spread beneath them, restless and glittering. Daniel held a glass of scotch, Caleb a glass of water. The air was cool, sharp with the tang of ozone from the day's storms. "Do you know the irony?" Daniel said, swirling the amber liquid. "For years, my team dismissed the flaw you identified, said it was negligible, said the probability of failure was microscopic. And yet," Caleb murmured, "a hairline fracture almost cost you everything." Daniel smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Sometimes I wonder if people are the same. Tiny cracks, invisible at first, but under enough pressure, they break." Caleb finished. He set down his glass. "Unless someone notices, unless someone seals the fracture before it destroys the whole system." Daniel looked at him sharply. The metaphor wasn't lost on either of them. By morning, photos of the repair had exploded online. Headlines screamed, "Homeless engineer saves billionaire's car." Clips of the handshake went viral. Comment sections split between awe and outrage. Some mocked Daniel for ever doubting. Others demanded justice for Caleb. Caleb himself stayed quiet. He returned to the shelter that night, slipping back into his cot as if nothing had changed. But inside, something had. The silence felt different now, less like exile, more like a pause before movement. Daniel, meanwhile, drafted calls to his legal team, to Sophia, to Dr. Eleanor Chen. Plans began to swirl, patents filed, facilities scouted, investors discreetly probed. For the first time in years, Daniel felt not the hunger of profit, but the stirrings of purpose. Weeks later, the world witnessed the ribbon cutting of the Turner Mercer Innovation Center, a sleek building of glass and steel, planted not in Silicon Valley, but in the very district where the apex had first sputtered into smoke. Reporters crowded the entrance. Drones hovered overhead. A banner read, "Where overlooked talent finds its second chance." Caleb stood at the podium in a simple navy suit, his voice carrying clear. "I was invisible for 3 years," he said. "But invisibility doesn't erase brilliance. It hides it. Our society cannot afford to keep wasting minds because of prejudice, poverty, or circumstance. This center exists to say genius belongs everywhere and to everyone. Whether you have a penthouse office or a cot in a shelter." The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. Behind him, Daniel Mercer stood silently, not as savior, but as partner. In the months that followed, the center filled with people society had written off. A woman who had once designed MRI machines before losing her license to bureaucracy, a veteran coder who had been blacklisted after a whistleblower case, a quiet man from a shelter who held 3 unpublished algorithms in his head. They worked together, fueled by belief rather than prestige. Within a year, the center filed 10 patents. By year 2, 40. Ideas poured out like a dam had burst. And every time Caleb reminded them, "This is not about me. This is about us, about the fractures we seal together." For Daniel, the transformation was personal. He found himself less interested in headlines, more in the quiet pride of building something that couldn't be measured in stock charts. He no longer introduced Caleb as the man who saved my car, but as my partner and one of the greatest minds of our age. As for Caleb, he still returned often to the shelter where it all began. He still taught kids science 3 nights a week, still folded his tarp with military precision. But now he carried keys, not just to a cot, but to a center alive with voices like his. No longer invisible, the story spread far beyond Silicon Valley. Universities studied it, governments debated it, other cities copied it, and in whispers, in articles, in podcasts, one truth kept resurfacing: brilliance exists everywhere. We simply have to look. And so the tale of a billionaire and a homeless man became something larger. It was no longer about a hypercar or a handshake. It was about possibility, about refusing to let the fractures in society spread until everything breaks. Because sometimes genius appears in the least likely places. Sometimes the man you cross the street to avoid is the one who will save not just your engine, but your future. If this story made you see the world a little differently, don't let it fade away. Share it. Subscribe to Beat Stories for more moments of justice and transformation. Stories that remind us that the next world-changing idea might come from the person society has taught you to ignore. Leave a comment. Who in your life once gave you a second chance, or who deserves one today? Let's make sure brilliance never goes unseen again.